Well, at the very beginning, I thought heading towards the last sections of today's conference, particularly in the sections with a title called Policy, Public Policy and Practice. That verse would be really frightening and made us sleepy, maybe. But after listening to Mr. Wong's so energetic presentations, I think some ideas would be well taken. Political message or look for election, whatever. I think that's probably form one of the agenda in culture, of course. But at the same time, we will have a lot of issues or problems heard about in previous sections. And probably it is time for us to turn them into something constructive and probably some directions for the futures. And that's why our four distinguished speakers on the panels will serve as the openings for these sections, and I hope to take the reins so that we can have some scopes of ideas for the further discussions. May I arrange the discussions in that order? I would invite teams to give a short presentation first, and then Winsome, Professor Tseng, and Vivienne Chow. So, team, can I pass them?
Thanks. I don't think you have any credibility unless you have PowerPoint, so I thought I'd bring at least one slide. I must say it's really wonderful to be here, and thank you very much to the Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association and to Paul Tam for inviting me. Also, thank you to you and your team for such a great piece of organisation. It's a beautifully run summit, so we're very grateful to you. I think I speak on behalf of everybody here. It's been really smoothly run. Having said that, I do have a complaint. I'm going to join Patrick's complaint about the title of this session. Public Policies and Practices for Wider Participation. It sounds really tedious, so we're going to have to really rev the engines, and we're glad we all had large cups of coffee during the break. So I wanted to start sort of with a bit of an apology, because I'm conscious that there are a lot of Australian accents in front of microphones during this conference, and I hear a lot of Australian accents when I walk around talking to people during the break. And it's always really surprising to me that a seemingly disproportionately high number of Australians end up in arts leadership positions these days. And I don't know whether you guys realise this, but if you go back about 40 years, I'm sure Patrick would maybe potentially remember that. Back 40 years, Australia was really regarded as a cultural desert or a cultural wasteland, and that's a rather disparaging and insulting remark I hear some people make about Hong Kong, and it's usually made by it's coming out of the voices of our former colonial oppressors. That's something that we all share, I think. A certain disdain for our cousins, the British, but. It is very surprising to me when I think about what Australia was like in the 1970s and how, really as a direct result of public policy, it has transformed itself. And so there were, just to give you a little glimpse of what Australia kind of was like, or what its international reputation was like, we have a very famous Australian entertainer and comedian whose name is Barry Humphries. And Barry had an enormous career in the UK, starting from actually the early 1960s. But in the 1970s, among his many characters, he created, of course, Dame Edna Everage, probably his most famous character. But my favourite one is a character called Sir Les Patterson. And Les Patterson was created in the 1970s. Supposedly, he appeared on stage for the very first time, completely unannounced, in London, just before a Dame Edna show, and he arrived and introduced himself to the audience as Australia's cultural ambassador. Does that work? Oh, that one. Les. So Les Patterson was a sleazy, groping drunk who was supposedly Australia's cultural ambassador, and this was a really big joke in London, and of course, we Australians kind of loved it as well. And that was the kind of international image of Australian culture in the 1970s. So the question really is, what happened in the space of about 40 years? And I suppose one of the big things that happened was the Sydney Opera House was built. And it's a remarkable piece of architecture and a great symbol of the fact that Australia does have a vibrant cultural life. But actually, I think more importantly than that, there has been 40 years of consistent public policy in support of the arts. And I think one of the most important things that happened in the early 70s was the establishment of the Australia Council for the Arts, which very importantly was set up as an arm's length government agency for arts funding, which means that we have a fairly rapid turnover of governments in Australia because the parliamentary term is 3 years, and prime ministers can call elections within 3 years. So over the space of the last 40 years, there have been many, many changes of government, but arts and culture policy has actually been managed by the Australia Council, which is at an arm's length remove from the government. And that means that there are long-term commitments that are made by the Australia Council in line with, in a way, a kind of longer-term cultural policy which survives the various changes of government and Prime Minister. So, occasionally you'll have an arts minister who will come in and want to make quite sweeping changes, but the Australia Council, which really represents the largest proportion of national arts funding, has already made contractual commitments beyond the life of the current government. And so you end up with a situation where, of course, it's tremendously frustrating for the minister, but it means the sector is actually relatively stable and has really benefited from that. So we've seen companies which were established, for example, Sydney Theatre Company established before that, but they've been able to really flourish and develop over time in the knowledge that they have consistent support at a federal level. And that's true of many of the major companies. The reason I mention the Australia Council today is that one of the things that they contribute to the cultural life of the country is they conduct research, and the research enables arts policy to really understand the landscape in which the arts sector is existing, where the challenges lie, where the opportunities lie, which art forms are growing, which art forms are suffering, how Australian artists are developing. And I should actually take that picture down. That's nicer. That's my new playground. And it's a tremendously helpful piece of research, and it's linked in with the census, that enormous piece of research that goes across the country every, I think, 7 years. And the census now includes a lot of interesting detail about people's participation in the arts, their engagement with the arts. And this allows the Australia Council and the policy-forming units of government to get a real understanding of big movements in culture, in the behaviour of audiences, and also really to develop a deep understanding of how artists can work and survive in this environment, and to really begin to understand what artists need to be able to flourish. So really, I feel that coming into Hong Kong after an absence of 6 years, coming back, and of course I'm tremendously thrilled to be here, but I'm looking for some kind of information and foundation on which to really work out what, in my small way, as the director of the former Central Police Station in Central, how can our organisation contribute to a really flourishing future for the arts? What can we do, and what are the needs? It's very hard to understand what those needs are. I feel that there are, how can we figure this out? What do we need to do? How do we know if what we're doing is working when it comes to audience growth and audience development? And the answer, of course, is in research. And I feel as if there are 4 subjects that we really need to probe into. We need to understand Hong Kong people's experience of the arts, how often they participate, in what fields, what is their depth of participation, and what is their depth of engagement. We also need to understand how to encourage, support and develop artists, what are their needs, and what directions are art forms taking. We also need to work out how Hong Kong artists are doing on the international stage. And I know this is something that's very close to Winsome's heart, and that the Arts Development Council has put a really big effort into supporting Hong Kong artists on the international stage. And I think that's an area for real focus and development. And then also to understand what is the cultural economy, to what extent do all of those major companies and small companies and individual artists contribute to the economy in a very broad way. These are, I think, really fundamental things that we really need to dig deep and understand in order to really make the right sort of decisions that have long-term impact. And I really wanted to use this moment of your time to invite anybody who would be interested in working on this particular piece of research to get in touch. Actually, maybe the Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association could be the receiving email address. Maybe Teresa would be happy to receive emails. But I'd like to work with a group of people from among our colleagues to really try and start this process going, where we work out what is the scope of research that we need to instigate to be able to develop a really profound understanding of these big questions, and then work out what we can all do to contribute to developing the audience and really making Hong Kong the great centre that we all know it can and will be. Thank you very much.
What I get is, I think he's suggesting our reviews of the art scene, not only of the experience and the behavior of Hong Kong people, but also the structure, art forms, and the different layers of the government that focus on arts and culture. Such a review is expected, and we hope that that could be one of the items for the next discussions of the art scene in future. If I read correctly, or maybe you can have your own interpretations and your feedbacks to the team, but let's you keep these feedback first, and after listening another rounds of presentations. Thank you, Winsome. May I pass the mic to you?
Hello. Hello, everybody. I had a little chat with Tim before this session, and somehow it's really interesting that we set our eyes on similar things. Really, looking at the Sergio for yesterday and for today, I have, the perspective that it seems we have not included any sessions on us as administrators working with artists in audience development. And I think this is a rather important missing part to me for a forum on audience development. Because I think, yes, there are now so many techniques, so many know-hows, instruments, expertise that we can make use of in building audience, or finding future audience, or identifying potential audience. But then, what about our artists? Artists actually should be a part of the equation, because without artists, us administrators would not be able to really plan or execute any particular measures, not to mention experimenting any innovative ideas on audience development. And I think this is quite an important part. And I fully agree with Tim that we should discuss more, maybe in the coming 1-2 years, on what artists, arts administrators, and other arts practitioners can come together and make an even brighter future for arts and culture in Hong Kong. But I think, at least for the topic itself, public policies, is a kind of, heavy for me, even for me as someone coming out of the government and now in an institution like Arts Development Council. Well, should we have very detailed public policies, or should we rather not? That's my question. So before going on to that, I know that I have only a limited period of several minutes. Perhaps I bring over a video. Some of you may already have seen it, but I'm going to show it again. Hopefully that it will, move you more. And because we are here in ADC, we are launching a new event called the New Arts Power, and we set our focus on the artists. So let's see it.
將自己嘅一啲諗法，用聲音嘅藝術去表現出嚟。
音樂對於我嚟講係乜嘢咧？
係喺我血、我嘅骨、我啲細胞嘅一部分。
我知道條路難行，唔會諗放棄呢樣嘢。
因為好中意音樂呢樣嘢，去到一個好困難或者好差嘅地步，都會係喺你個心入面，嗰團火係唔會熄。
音樂係可以，就算係得一個人一支吉他，原來都有啲咁大嘅一啲理念係可以講出嚟。
歸根究底，其實講緊一啲好喺世俗嘅嘢，咁但係到最尾我哋完結嘅時候，亦都係一瞬間就已經過去。
咁我諗係將自己嘅一啲質地咯，咁慢慢滲出去。
我哋每一次去將呢啲嘢俾觀眾睇嘅時候，其實都係一種力量嚟。
為天地立心，為生民請命，為往聖繼絕學，為萬世開太平。
舞蹈係幫我去進入我個身體，去揾啲力量出嚟咯。
創作的時候會有一個自我跟自我的鬥爭在裡面。
我覺得係好玩到你停唔到嘅。
你會最常聽到係咁㗎啦呢個世界，但係偏偏跳舞同埋創作就係講俾我聽，生命唔止係咁。
我要透過舞蹈創作去揾香港人嘅 identity，
好像一種任務，一種使命。
用舞蹈咁特別嘅語言，令到世界可以更加細，從動作之中化解一啲人同人之間嘅 tension。
當我喺台上邊，我感覺到自己嘅存在。
即係可能有一日我嘅身體都唔可以支撐到做好多舞蹈嘅動作啦，我依然覺得舞蹈係一個好重要嘅嘢。
Thank you, thank you. I think this really, actually, it's a kind of our expression that we want not only to fund artists, but then we not only want to help artists to go out to overseas arts festivals, markets, biennales, but then we also want to help artists to really grow. Grow in the sense of how they come back to Hong Kong, how they get to know Hong Kong more, and how Hong Kong people can get to know them more. And through this two-way process, we hope our artists would get more nourishment to really knock out what they meant by saying we want to have a Hong Kong identity. We want to show what we think in our society, their language, their skills, and most of all, the contents of their works. Because these are the artists that will go out even more, because so far they have been very successful on international stage and museums and exhibition galleries. But then, they will go further in the years to come. And how are they going to strengthen their work? And I think what we are doing is to build another platform so that they have conversations with different sectors in the society. For example, cinematic theater is now traveling across the territory with a 5.5 tons container on trucks. And then they're traveling to schools, public housing estates, even shopping arcades, to have shows, to have interactions with the people there. And then some dancers, they really step out of their comfort zone. Hyoko Cho has chosen to work with children with special needs. And Kui Wong, even, a very gentle dancer choreographer, she has chosen to work with juvenile delinquent, kids. And then Rebecca Wong is working with elderly people. Yang Hao, it's even more ambitious. He is working with ethnic minorities. He is working with children from low-income families. So we are making all these connections so that they would get their stories and they would get what Hong Kong is, and they would be more than ready in future to tell the world what Hong Kong is and will be, and what they want Hong Kong to be. And I think that is all. And this is one part of our job, and I think we would try to pursue perhaps even more innovative ideas in future. And I think for arts administrators, if we are always encouraging artists to be creative, then we should encourage ourselves to be more innovative, to find new places for the arts, to build more platforms, to break all boundaries, and to try all new ideas. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Winsome, for the video and the presentations, reminding us not only the concept of audience, but also the individuals of artists or individuality of the artists. I think that is also one of the key points that we have to consider when we talk about the audience developments. And a very interesting individual stories of different art forms presented in the videos, but one theme strikes me are the social impacts the artists bring to the society. Perhaps these concepts, how to measure social impact and how to relate social impacts with the art, could be one of the directions or one of the perspectives in seeing the future of the market. I'm not sure, or the future of the audience. That's one of the possible way of discussions. Okay, Professor Chen. Yeah, you have plenty of time, actually.
Thank you, Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association, for inviting me to share, and congratulations for a very inspiring conference so far. I'm going to take you through the next 5 minutes to start from what I learned over the last 1.5 days, best practices, and I will end up with public policy there. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so I just try to drop down some of the main points that different speakers in this conference have so far mentioned, what I refer to as best practices on audience development. I think you have heard almost all of these, so I'm going to be very quick. Well, we need clear objectives and very clear intended outcomes. We need to know where you are, and that's why we need to know the reach and also the frequency of our audiences if you're an arts organization. We need to follow up, and that seems to me to be the key to audience development there. Michael Kaiser has said that audience building is not one-off event, but we're trying to cultivate a habit of attending performances. So it's not enough just planting a seed, that we need to follow up. And I guess, well, we have so many experienced marketers here that I think one of the first things I learned from my marketing teacher was that if you are any good as a marketer, someone who has given you a contact or has visited your event can never escape from you. There. We need constant evaluation, even though it's very difficult there, but we need to constantly evaluate, because only that we know whether our learning outcome, whether our outcomes have achieved. We need to base all our strategies, approaches on researchers, what I think many of our speakers has spoken on there, so I'm not going to dwell on that, but I think Kingsley shared with us the audience, arts audience insight of the UK. There's participation studies in the US and in different countries in Australia. We need partnership and network. And this is something really for the entire sector. That even big organizations like the Hong Kong Film, Hong Kong Art Festival, I think they are still limited in their effort in reaching out. That we need to work all together. And it seems to me that all these point out to the importance in audience building, the evidence-based management, evidence-based marketing. It has to be based on research, and we don't want to leave too many things to guesswork. There is not enough just to say that, oh, audience development is something good that we should do, but we need to measure. We need to base on evidence. With that, I want to move on to my reading of what are the collective needs of the sector in Hong Kong. And I stress that's only my personal reading, which you may or may not agree. I think we need research on existing audience, sector-wide research. And I think one of the best things I heard in the last 1.5 days is the West Kowloon presentation of what they did on the segmentation and all that. Research on potential audience. We need the know-how on evaluation and measurement. We need interpretation, readings of data and research studies, because so many of these are difficult to understand. We need to explain to artists and to practitioners how to use those data, how do we base our work on those data. We need joint promotion to attract audiences from nearby cities. We need joint promotion to attract local audiences. If some of us find it's difficult to get data or to do CRM, well, could we work together to have an arts card in Hong Kong? Or can we try the test drive schemes, which unfortunately I don't think anybody touch on test drive yet, but if we have time, I think we can delve on that. We need sharing of best practices. We need someone to give general advice on or consultancy on marketing and audience development. We need training, and we need an enhancement of our brand, branding or rebranding of the arts. And my proposition, I'm a very pragmatic person, is that we should have an audience agency in Hong Kong to address these needs, or some of the needs that I mentioned. There are a number of overseas examples. The audience agencies in the UK, in the States, American for the Arts, the National Marketing Project, etc. And I finish off with public policy on involvement, how the government should be involved in audience development. I think my insight is not as broad as Tim's. I try to just focus on audience development. I think we need to fund research studies. We need to encourage capacity building of our practitioners and also artists. We need to fund, hopefully we can fund AD audience development intermediaries, such as the audience agency that I proposed. We need encouragement of community art space through some kind of property rights arrangement. We need branding or rebranding of the arts and I think the ADC at one stage actually enjoy APIs from the government. Can we use that for rebranding of the arts? That I don't know how possible it is, but I just throw out those ideas. So that's all my proposition. Thank you.
Sometimes I feel I'm guilty to press every speaker to round up all the things within 5 minutes, and I don't think we have time to digest all the things. But anyway, we may keep those issues on our paper and notebook, and so that we we have time for further discussions. So I would like to invite Vivienne as the last speaker to open up our mind and agenda.
Hi, very happy to be here. Thank you, HKAAA, for inviting me to share my experiences and maybe say a few things that could be useful to all of you, the arts administrators here. The media and audience building. The media plays an important role in audience building, obviously. I'm sure many of you has reached out, if not to me, but my colleagues, to write a story about your show, your coming exhibitions, and your initiatives. And I'm sure many of you have been rejected over and over again. It has nothing to do, well, most of the time. It's not necessarily something to do with the artistic quality of your show. It's about how we can come up with a story that can connect your show with our audience, that means our readers. And a lot of the times, it's quite difficult because some of the programs that we come across, it's just very difficult to find a point that I can connect your show with my readers, and that's one really important issue. So I think as we, after yesterday's experience at the workshop at the Facebook one with George Chen, so today we all know that the media is under a huge challenge. And we as journalists, so we have to constantly reinvent ourselves. And the media is also reinventing themselves. So sometimes I'm confused. Am I a journalist or am I a KOL? Just yesterday I got an email from a mobile phone company I've never heard of in China, asking me to if I would like to try out their new mobile phone and post a few photos of selfies, because the phone is designed to take selfies. Well, I'm very flattered if you consider, I have really great skill in taking selfies, but I have to be also very careful because I cannot let these kind of invitations or suggestions, proposals to jeopardize my reputation and my stance as a journalist. So now we all know that so Facebook and Google, basically all the social media, so they are eating up the avenue, the ad revenue of the world, which means what's happening in the media is that so we're losing. We're losing money. There are job cuts. The print is not sustainable anymore. So there are a lot of things that we have to do. And as reporters, we have to do a number of things, like a million things. So sitting in the office, writing a story, those days were gone. Today we have to do a number of things together. So we have to do live tweet. Which means like you're tweeting like every 2 seconds. And then you have to manage your own Facebook, and then your page, and share content and whatever, and then Instagram. And some of the younger reporters, they also do like Snapchat and like stuff that I don't know. So we are very busy and very occupied today. And what we have to do now is that a lot of us, we have to go through retraining. We have to train ourselves all over again. So these 3 slides, I don't know if you can see properly, these 3 pictures. So the one on the far left, so that's it's a Facebook post by Ho Xiaobin. I think some of you would know him. So he's one of the most senior reporters, cultural reporters in Hong Kong, and he works for the Lifestyle Journal. This is his video. He's saying that he has to learn how to do video editing all over again. Bun has been a writer for I don't know how many years, and now he has to learn video editing to do everything on his own. And I'm not there yet. So I do something else. I also have to do video, but I do live video, so I don't have to edit. But then that means that I have to be very outspoken. I have to deliver your lively presentation from time to time. So instead of Facebook or Instagram, so I use Twitter, simply because I have a lot more followers on Twitter. And so these are some of the live videos that I've been experimenting. And the great thing about this is that it's like showing my followers my art experiences at different places. So the one down there was, I was shot a documenta in Kassel earlier, and it had nearly 25,000 views. And then you had comments like they keep coming in, which means that you have to be very responsive. You have to answer all their questions, sometimes really weird questions. But then the great thing about this kind of live streaming event is that it's very interactive, and then it dawns on me that communication is about being interactive. So, and it's also about telling your story to them. And at the end of the day, building an audience is about building a community. You have to put yourself out there and have your personal touch with the people, which leads to the founding of Cultural Journalism Campus. That's my grassroots nonprofit. People have been asking me, what's cultural journalism about? I've been trying to find words to describe what CJC is about. But CJC is essentially about building a community. So we do 2 flagship programs. So the first one is CJC Fellowship. So we have been running CJC Fellowship for 4 years already, since 2014. CJC Fellowship is essentially a cultural journalism and art criticism training program that takes place at Art Basel. This is a very unique program because every year we select 10 young writers, not only from Hong Kong, but also from mainland China or other parts of the world. And we will station at Art Basel. We offer them workshop by art critics, journalists, editors, and we work with them closely to help them develop their stories. We have our pop-up newsroom at Art Basel, and we would publish their stories, we work with them, and then we'll print the newspaper, and the content will also go online. This year, we also started doing Facebook Live, and I let the students do whatever they want. Well, they would develop their own language because it is their thing. So I give them free hand to experiment things that they would like to do and stories they would like to tell. And the great thing about CJC Fellowship is that, so now we have about 40 members in of the alumni. And we're still closely in touch. Some of them are here today. And after graduation, some of them are remaining in the cultural sector, or they manage to find jobs in the creative field, or they work in the media. So in a way, it's to give them an opportunity and exposure to an international art event, and also to meet people from all over the world within such a short and intensive period. And today we still hang out, we'll still go to see art exhibitions or go to art culture events together. And I would refer them if I have someone asking me for recommendation for jobs. But it's something that I really enjoy personally, and it has the personal touch. I think it's really important to keep them together and to keep the community together, because they are the future audience, or they are the current audience. And this is the newspaper that we put out at Art Basel. And the other flagship program that we do is CJC Outreach. So the Outreach is about bringing art experiences to children who otherwise might not have the opportunity to go out to see art exhibition. And it's about having fun, giving them a great art day out. I think this is something that a lot of us have forgotten when we talk about arts education. Education is boring to children. They're already suffering in school. They have a lot of exams, they have a lot of tests, they have to go to all these piano, violin classes, and whatnot. But I want to create an environment and experience for them that, okay, it is okay to just have fun. It's not about learning something particular, specific, but then to have fun with arts and culture experiences. Just go out, see what's out there, and to experience something that you won't see at school. And we also do like art workshops at a public housing estate. And me and my friends, so we'll actually go out there to conduct these kind of workshops, which is something that's very rewarding, and it's also building a personal connection with the participants, with these children. It's something that is really important through these experiences, through the activities, we build our small little community. And these kids, when they grow up, they are going to be your future audience. So that's the end of my sharing. Thank you very much.
The type is more high level in the sense that it would be more, you need an overview of something, as team suggests, maybe more research, a review of the art scene. We have to mapping something in a more macro view so that different agencies in the art scene could have a time to review their own positions and see what is the possible direction in response to the changing market and the audience sectors. Probably this would be in a more high-level perspective. That's one thing. And the second type of questions relate to Winsome, the focus on individual artists, growing talents, and maybe related themes will be on social impacts of artists. That probably form another areas of discussions. And the third areas will be a more comprehensive training, educational requirements for arts organizations and government agents to do research, evaluations, or follow-up actions, so and so. And the last type of questions would be on connectivity. I think the mediums or the media to get connected to the artist, to the audience, itself is a problematic issue. How can we do that? We heard about a lot of discussions before on technologies, on platform, from Facebook, Instagram, the other social media. And Vivienne suggests some angles for us to discuss how to get them connected in the social media space. So that is my categorizations of different types of questions in different orders. So can I first invite the speaker on the panel to, if I forced you to prioritize those issues, would it be possible? Or in another approach is, will you pick up one or the most important themes you would like to further debate so that we can have a focus and let other audience to take part in? Any volunteers from the panel? Yeah? Oh, thanks, team, you saved my life.
Maybe not. Actually, one of the things that I was really pleased to hear Kathy Hong say earlier was something that doesn't come up often enough, and that is the absolute unwavering commitment to quality. And I think before we start doing any research, we obviously need to make sure that the art and the artists are healthy, and that we have this commitment to quality, and that we support artists to achieve the highest possible quality. I think that's a really fundamental thing. But beyond that, I guess the subject of what we're here to discuss today is how do we make sure that that quality is seen by as many people as possible and fully appreciated. So if I had to prioritize, assuming that we've all bought into the complete commitment to high quality art and artists, I really do come back to this fundamental starting point of understanding in a very deep way the health of the sector. I think that's really what I was trying to capture in my presentation, which was to be able to develop a sort of annual health report. I know that the ADC has a certain amount of that in place, but it's a very broad question, and I think it does need to link into a deep understanding of the cultural behaviour of the whole population, and to really not be afraid of some of the scary things that we might discover about the level of cultural participation, because it gives us a baseline to work from. I just read in preparation for today. I read the Australia Council's most recent publication, which is called Arts Nation, and it is this. It's the health report that comes out every few years when there's updated information, and it drills into a lot of really valuable information. 46% of the population participate actively in creative pursuits. A much higher number, something like 85 or 86%, are engaged with the arts, but the difference between engagement and participation is analysed. It also goes into analysing how much the people spend on their cultural participation, the average ticket price, and all those sorts of things. This is where we kind of really need to dig into that to really define, describe the baseline, and then work out where we're going to put our efforts to increase the numbers, but also deepen the appreciation and participation.
Okay. Any immediate feedbacks from the speakers on the deep understandings of audience behaviors?
Perhaps I should share more because really the ADC has an annual art survey in which data on attendance to cultural shows, exhibitions, they're all captioned, analyzed in relation to different art forms, in particular the performing arts, the film arts. But then, this has become sort of more static analysis. And thanks to the Home Affairs Bureau, we have actually almost finished another study on arts consumption. And it's really on people's behavior in participation in the arts. And it is not confined to only attendance at indoor venues or programs or exhibitions, but it's really on why people take part. We even take into account shows and activities in schools and universities, and how people take part and how do they learn about this, all these events and this sort of thing. And this will be the start, hopefully, if the Bureau, support it's ongoing. Because my belief is that for any survey, for any research, it wouldn't be meaningful if there is not a long-term view. And because it's only over the years that survey of that sort can be made even, more comprehensive and more meaningful. Also, it would have to progress as our arts ecology and environment progress. So, and especially if we are to look at data that happens that was from 5 years ago, and if you have data today, then the comparison would tell things, and so it's going to be another interesting study, hopefully, telling fellow administrators more about how we are doing and what we should be doing.
Okay, so existing data should be continued. Yeah, and any other response?
I really wait eagerly for Winsome's report or the ADC report, the arts participation report, because as far as I remember, and I think Patrick can correct me or anyone else can correct me, the last time that a public survey on the arts, surveying the public and not just the arts audience, was from 1992. So that was 25 years ago, and that, if I remember, that was conducted by SRH there. And I think in the same year, because at that time our census data actually also collect data on whether people attended and whether they are interested. And if I remember correctly, in 1992, 21% of the population said they have an interest in the arts, but 5% said they are participating. So there's good and bad news of both, of that figure, because, well, 5% obviously is not a high figure there, but 21% was interested. So we do have the potential to change people there. I don't know, I mean, I might be wrong, but in any case, I think what Winsome said is really very interesting, and I really hope that when the report finally comes out, that somebody, either the 3As or ADC or West Kowloon, would have a session and share the findings with us, and hopefully invite people to comment and to read into those figures and how explain the relevance of some of those data there. Because I take an example of the what I think is a brilliant report every year by the ADC, the annual art survey there, which I understand the ADC spend a lot of time on it and carries a lot of valuable data. But it seems to me not many people are using that properly there, and we may, or most of us, we may need a little bit of help on how to read the figures or the things behind the figures.
Ask them. Okay. I'm interested in Professor Cheng's slide when I spot a few words called advertising, audience agency in UK. I'm very impressed by the agency because the research and the data published by the agencies is much wider than the narrow focus just on audience participations. Can you elaborate or give us some more detail about this?
In fact, I don't think we need to model ourselves on anything. I think if there's a need to set up such an agency, we address the need. That we try to address the need in Hong Kong. And because the need in the States, the needs in the UK are different from Hong Kong. So I think what I propose really is hopefully there will be a platform to discuss whether there's such a need in Hong Kong for sharing of data, for transfer of know-how, for help particularly to smaller organizations on how to market themselves properly, and on joint promotion to our tourists from China and to the yet to be converted local people there, or even further, a rebranding of the arts, all these things, whether somebody or whether an independent organization should be working, if there's a need, who should take that up? Should it be an independent organization, or, I don't know, a crazy idea could be a subsidiary of the AAA, there, if there's a need only.
Okay. May I open the floor and intake questions or any suggestions from the floor? No matter the issues on a deep understanding of audience or other issues presented by the guests. Any suggestions or issues you? Oh, sorry.
Hi, that's fine. Deborah Hennig here. One of the things that I think has been missing from this conversation is the issue around the data that we are not getting from UrbTix. We are all needing to work with EuRTICs. We are forced to if we want to have our leaflets on a leaflet rack. Well, we have to be using EuRTICs or we cannot. But the really big problem is that we are not getting any data from them. And I understand that they're hanging this on privacy, but every country in the world has privacy regulations, and they're very strict. But we have no access to our ticket buyers. So it's fine for us to talk about finding the audience of the future and building our new future audiences, but we don't know who our audience today is. And I think this is a huge problem. Having been in Hong Kong now for more than 3 years, I think this is really hurting the sector. So one of your speakers mentioned, that you are not a good marketer if you have an audience member and you lose them. Well, who are they? We can't find them. The Hong Kong Phil, almost 70% of our audience, we did not know who they are. And this is low-hanging fruit. And we really need that data. That's the data that we need now. And we need to be able to cultivate the people that we have and that are coming. Then we can really move ahead with even more confidence in building an audience for tomorrow.
It's Tim.
One of my favorite subjects. No, but it's true. Actually, just when I was doing a little bit of research for today, I was looking at some statistics again in the Australia Council report. Very interesting piece of information, because from around about 2005 or 6, a number of the major performing arts companies started to use Tessitura, which many of you may know is a very sophisticated database that manages audience information, but also allows you to manage your relationship with every single member of the audience, and to understand their not only understand their buying patterns, but also to understand to really have a kind of lifelong view of your relationship with the audience. And ultimately, the idea is that once somebody becomes a single ticket buyer, you are able to cultivate that relationship, and eventually you want them to become more than just a regular buyer or a subscriber. You want them to become a donor. You want them to be involved, to get to meet the artists. You want them ultimately to leave a bequest. And so it's this Tessitura is designed to enable that relationship for arts organisations. And I was just reflecting on this because it started to be used about say 12 years ago. Between 2009 and 2014, individual donations to the arts sector increased by 84%. That's a massive amount of increase. It means effectively that the proportion of government funding reduced because arts organisations' budgets were increasing because they had access to new avenues of funding, and they didn't have such a heavy reliance on government funding. So there's a kind of incentive in there, I think, somewhere. But it's a sophisticated system, and it's obviously very clear that Hong Kong needs to upgrade the ticketing system that at the moment creates a kind of firewall between the arts organisation and its public. And it's it's also holding back techniques of marketing, because I do find it pretty amazing that people still really collect A4 size leaflets about arts events when they go to EuRTIC's outlets and Tom Lee. And so it's I think everyone in the room agrees that it's long overdue for an upgrade. I think Kylie has a copy of a letter that I wrote 10 years ago, which was signed by all the performing arts companies requesting an upgrade. So it's really something that will unleash the capacity of all of the arts organisations to have relationships with their audiences, which are far more sophisticated, and will open up avenues of funding which will take burden off government.
Okay. Reason well noted. Any additional opinions on this one?
I'm just curious, will Kwun have its own ticketing system?
We will eventually. For the first couple of years, we will need to rely on EUHK because of the relationships we have with other companies who are locked into that kind of monopoly.
So you are heading the crusade.
I don't think I'm alone. Hands up.
Yeah, you lead it. Perhaps maybe another talk with the optics. And I think just going back. Early on, you asked us whether we have any priorities, whether we should do research first, or we should do what first. But I think there's, always difficulties to really check out the priorities. And I would rather say that for every one of us should find his or her own priorities at different times. And because if you are working in institutions, you may have the advantages and the limitations of the institutions. But then, going back, I would rather say that it's not only necessary to forget the word education when we are trying to really teach children about the arts. The same thing goes that is we should make it, more funful for us practitioners to be part of the creative process in the planning, in the execution, and in working with artists, and even in attracting people who are not used to the arts. Even, say for example, you may come, well, is Kingsley still here? I was, talking to government departments, works departments, all these experts with Kingsley on his coming exhibition, and it can be so boring. But then, in the end, we make it really something interesting, not only for our arts project, but also for the technical experts in the meeting. And they get so involved, and they even later on asked to be part of the creative team. So I think in whatever ways, we should make this process really enjoyable, not only to the few, but to all the people involved, because it is only through this kind of exchange and collaboration can more people get inspired and moved by the arts and become future audience or future supporters or anybody, even they can tell their families, and I think that is even more crucial.
Thanks, Winsome.
I'd like to say that a lot of great issues and questions have been raised over these past 2 days. The issue of optics and among other things. But one issue is, now we're talking about public policies. How do we get the people outside of this theater to care about what we are talking about now? It's I think it's one of my missions, and also one of the questions that I've been trying to answer myself over the years as a media worker. How do I make my editors, first of all, care about what I wanted to write about, and then to make them relevant to our audience? Because in order to grow an audience, it's important to start to make them care about arts and culture, why it's important to them, and it's worth spending public money on. And of course, there's been a lot of discussions over the years, and a lot of stories have been written, and usually stories revolving around this topic has got the lowest hit rate, the lowest viewership. Unless it involves some political debates, that people would get really excited. So I think one important issue that I hope that we can achieve is to find a way to present our ideas in a language that most people outside would understand and get them interested, and don't find it in a way that's it's not boring, it's part of their lives, and have fun, because we have really forgotten about having fun.
Maybe I could add something. I think when you're talking about arts journalism, one of the things that's very rare is that sense, particularly when you're reading criticism. It's very rare to find the quality of reviewing in any country where, even if it's a bad review or it's a critical review, you kind of still want to have experienced the show. And this is, I think, is it's a kind of gift. It's the art of art criticism, where you have writers who are so skilled and so knowledgeable that they really make you want to go, even though they might be picking a few holes in the experience themselves. And it used to drive me crazy in Sydney, where it's a very limited scene in my field, in classical music criticism, very limited scene, and you'd read the review and it's so lifeless. And somehow I think there's a real responsibility on journalists and art critics of the arts, performing arts and visual arts, to have a kind of vibrancy about their writing that makes you, it kind of really involves you in it and makes you want to go, even though it may not be the greatest thing on earth.
Do you know a lot of us don't get paid when we write? I think that's one huge issue with the media landscape here, particularly in Hong Kong. It's much better overseas. If you write in English language, then you have a much bigger market. But if you write in Chinese language and you're publishing in a local media, a lot of the websites, they can't afford to pay you. And if you have a full-time job doing something else, then you write you write on your own, at your own time. Great. So you're not relying on writing to make a living. But then if you do, and if you're a paid journalist, a staff writer, then it's very difficult. It's not really about whether the journalist he or she would like to write better. It's just that they are not allowed to. I can tell you one example. Once I was asked to write about a Hong Kong concert, David Bowie's Hong Kong concert. I was given only 30 minutes to write it up, and that was right after we found out that he died. So 30 minutes to produce, to write about my memories of a David Bowie concert. I think I needed time to think it through first, and that could take 30 minutes. But then no, they want to publish the story in 30 minutes. So I have to squeeze everything. I would like to write much better, but I was not allowed to under such circumstances. And it happens very frequently because of the media landscape, because of the news cycle today. You have to be churning out content all the time. So that's one huge issue. But then if writers they are given a stress-free environment that they can express themselves, and they can really practice reviewing performances and exhibitions and art shows, I think that would help a lot in the long run in building future audiences.
Yes. Okay.
I get the mic first.
Oh, okay.
Building a future audience. So when I look into and it's pleasantly listen to all and share with all the expertise, ideas about audience, building our future audience. I would like to learn from the leaders here. So is Hong Kong looking at the future audience is really looking into the community of Hong Kong only, or we just look like from like London or New York or Sydney? Do they have audiences from overseas, international audience? Do we look into this area and how to attract and engage international audience into Hong Kong? International doesn't mean there's only the Western world, but maybe in China, Taiwan, Singapore, Southeast Asia. So this is an audience that we will look into for Hong Kong as a global art and cultural center. I'm very impressed by the passionate ideas and also discussion by like Winsome. What you have done in the HKADC is really, really heart-touching. A lot of effort done by the government and public policy. But look into our West Kowloon or like Tai Kwun, are we positioning this just into the Hong Kong audience and dig into through big data and look into that? Yes, we need to look into it. But do we also need to look into international audience? Like Art Basel, each year they attract a lot of audience coming to Hong Kong. It's too squeezed. I heard from Teresa that you have to turn down people coming over. So can we look into this? And then I want to address it to Tim, that you bring Hong Kong Philharmonic out to China, to international, to play around, to perform and get international recognitions before. So for Tai Kwun, how would you position it? And how do you look into the balance of international audience and Hong Kong community? Thank you.
Thanks. Big question. I think first of all, there's a really big difference between being the manager of a performing ensemble and being the manager of a location, a venue or a site. In the case of the orchestra, you know, it's a weird thing about building your own audience at home. If you can come back from an international tour with great accolades and a fantastic review from the New York Times or from The Guardian, it really means a lot to your home audience. It seems a bit weird, but I just know that in my own experience with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra a long time ago, we had a really big tour in the United States and it got spectacular reviews in the New York Times from a Carnegie Hall concert and a Washington Post from a Kennedy Center concert. And we made sure, of course, that all of that was covered back in the Australian press. What I noticed the next time when the orchestra came back from the tour, their first concert back in the Opera House, Ado walked out on stage and they got a standing ovation before they played. So that kind of really meant a lot. It meant that audience really appreciated their success internationally. It's exactly the same as, I think, sports teams. When you want your team to go and win an international trophy, it's that same kind of civic pride. So that's a particular reason why you have a need to put yourself on the international stage if you're a performing ensemble. My thoughts are rather different when it comes to Tai Kwun, because really this whole project is for the people of Hong Kong, and it's something so tremendously distinctive. I always tell people that one of the most exciting things about working on this project is a few of us know what's behind that facade on Hollywood Road, but I say 95% of the population has no idea about the generosity of the spaces that will unfold as you walk on site. And I feel that our focus is really to get Hong Kong people so excited about the space, about the exquisite heritage restoration that has gone on over the last several years, about the arts programs that we'll be presenting, about all the public activation that we'll be doing, for people to just love that whole idea so much that, of course, they're going to tell their international visitor friends, but it's probably booked out. That would be my ideal situation, where it's so embraced by the Hong Kong community that, of course, it's a highly desirable thing for international visitors to experience, but they better get in early because the take-up rate is so high. That's kind of the vision that I have. I don't think that we should have too much of a focus on promoting it internationally, because I really feel that those great desirable destinations have first of all been established because they belong to their community. Their communities absolutely love them, they're committed to them, they go to them all the time, and that's why international visitors want to go to them. I think that's got to be the starting point.
Can I just add a little bit? I think it's, my personal belief is that Hong Kong has been international for years, for centuries even. So this questions of whether we should distinguish, we have international audience or not, and whether we should grow that never bothers me, no matter in what kinds of arts. I would rather say that our artists, and they are now of such a diversity, and some of which are now traveling, very easily into mainland China to find their new audiences. Some are going even in the region, like Lam Yik Hua. It's now opening his 5th new show, grand shows, in the National Theatre of Taipei in December, I suppose, or January. And his shows can run across mainland China for more than 70 performances, and then go to Singapore and then to other places in Asia. So we have artist groups like that. But then we also have artists that are more concerned with local communities. But then, what I want to say is that for every individual artist groups, there should be a really well thought out plan of how to grow audience, whether locally or regionally or internationally. And us administrators should be even more skillful in identifying the strengths and weaknesses, and also how they can bring the artists to their destinations. As a matter of fact, why we are doing NAP, the New Arts Power, not in formal theatres, although we also have paid performances and exhibitions. But then we are doing most of our work in really unconventional spaces in Hong Kong. One of the reasons is that we don't have enough theatres or museums or galleries. We only have less than half of the theatres than London. So it's only, what I want to say is that even with such deficiency in professional facilities, we can still make our own showgrounds if we are innovative enough.
Thank you. Can I take one?
Hi, I've got the mic here. If we think audience development in terms of sustainability, I think we should include both the international audience and the home audience, so to speak. In that sense, I'd like to ask a question for the speakers. How do you see policy initiatives or policy actions that could bring home audience into their cultural background, the traditions, their own experience, not simply with the kind of arts that we are trying to bring in, like music, orchestra, but also as traditional folk arts. What's the place of those traditional folk arts and culture in the area of audience development? If we think about this from policy perspective, what kind of research, would that be a kind of research that could bring those traditional arts, folk practices into the scene?
I guess core issue is no matter how we define the scopes of our sector, but there are always some what we call niche sector left out, and how to include as many as possible those quote-unquote niche sector to be in the pie is one of the key concerns, which the audience would say, how can you make it sustainable?
I'm not sure. Right? I'm not sure I can comment on government policy, but as a venue manager, we've got a fundamental commitment to offer as broad a range of programming as we possibly can in order to attract the widest possible audience. It's one of those things you hear arts organisations say all the time, but it is true. We need to make sure that we are providing a platform for such a wide range of arts and cultural activities that we can reach the whole community. So that's kind of a motivation for us to engage with the traditional performing arts and traditional visual arts alongside the more sort of institutionalized arts.
May I add a little bit? I think you may need to, you can also look into the Sichuan Hei Kuk Zhongsam, the West Kowloon Sichu Center. I think they have a plan for traditional folk arts to be there as well, if I'm not wrong.
Maybe I can say two things. So about the international audience. So over the past a year and a half, so I've been contributing to a number of international publications. It's interesting how how these international media, how they look at Hong Kong, and how they see us. I find it more and more difficult to sell Hong Kong stories to international media. Of course, there are a number of reasons, and I don't think I'm going to explain or go into detail here. But I think one thing that's really important is that we need to constantly put ourselves on the international map. Even if maybe people who are reading the stories overseas, they might or might not be coming to Hong Kong, but I think it's important to remind them that we are here and we are doing a lot of great things and we have a lot of things to offer. That's number one. And in terms of traditional culture, folk art, I think the different government departments, they have been doing different things, like the intangible cultural heritage. So they have a special office, and they have been doing research, and they have to they have their own programs too, like promoting kung fu, and there are other events. So I think a lot of people, different stakeholders, they are working really hard on their own, and as a small nonprofit, CJC, I don't cover just visual art. It's called Cultural Journalism Campus, so it's a whole range of culture, which means visual art, performing arts, heritage, or other things that is related to culture. So we have limited resources and we have limited time, but of course, we would hope that we can do as much as possible to offer the kind of cultural experiences to young people, and so that they can grow into enjoying these experiences, and then in future, when they have their own, when they have a good salary, then they can constantly support the arts.
Time is running fast. Yes, I can take one more questions because we are close to the end of the section. Yes.
Okay, I'm going to make it very short. Vivienne, we talk about how can we make art as a mainstream in Hong Kong. Yeah? So from my experience and then me being a mother, art promote and train a critical thinking. And then we, art, as an artist, I'm not an artist, but I admire art. So artists bring a different point of view and then challenging, and then don't stay in the status quo. Otherwise, they are imitators, right? In this world, AI and robotics are taking over laboring from human beings, right? And we see it in the 5, 10 years, 20 years. Our children is gonna experience it, right? That's gonna be part of their life. So what can we do? We really gotta promote those, and train, artistic mind, meaning, creating, challenging, don't stay in the status quo, bringing a different perspective. Those are, essential for art. And I think art can be mainstream. And it has to be mainstream, from my point of view. And then there is an art school in America, sorry, I don't remember which, but they're offering executive training to blue chip companies, and they're taking it. There is a new movement, I think, that people start to realize the art matters. So I think it'll be so wonderful. Hong Kong is such a concise, place that if the government can, have the big content like that, and they conduct those big data survey and the things, and then have a, sort of there are so many, performing arts and visual art companies here gathering. You have body to work with. Everybody do their own, the belief and the vision and art form. But there can be one thing that we can all can align, art matters. It'll be so wonderful, and the Hong Kong is gonna hit that very special spot on globe. Sorry, it's not a question. But it'll be wonderful because we could see that kind of initiative.
Thank you. Thanks for your opinion. So if there's, sorry, sorry. If there is no further questions, may I invite the speaker to a very short round-up of what are the policy items suggest to our government after listening and presenting all those things? Any public policy items? Actually, we have a little bit, but I invite you to consolidate all those things into one of the keywords or one of the few key items suggested to the government. Winsome? Yes.
I still have the artists at heart. So my hope is that government would be able to create or facilitate, more art spaces to come up, no matter formal or informal. Artists need space to create, to experiment, to produce, and to display. That's all.
Okay. And that space includes political space, right?
Well, if you choose to, I think it's all kinds of space.
Yes, Tim?
Well, I think, just going back to the theme of really being able to understand the health of the sector, I don't think that's something the government can do on its own, but I think there's a willingness within the sector to work collaboratively to try and really delve into that and understand in a profound way. what the health of the arts sector is in Hong Kong, both from the point of view of the artists and from the audiences, and then to really, we all share this objective of increasing our audiences and increasing the audience's participation and appreciation. I think that's the foundation for a really interesting partnership, but we need to get that first piece of work done very collaboratively.
Okay. On that point, I think reflections on the problems of optics, the ticketing system, as well as the requirement for data transparency is one of the key issues that the sector should address, or the government should address. Also the competitions, right, in the ticketing system sector, so that the data could be allowed to be available for analysis.
I would hope the funding bodies would place more emphasis on encouraging and rewarding evidence-based marketing or evidence-based audience development. That I think it's important that we work smarter and not necessarily harder.
Okay. Yes. There is a concept called audience-centric, which is maybe relevant to our discussions.
Freedom, all kinds of freedom. Whether you work in the media, you work in the arts, you work in education, freedom is our foundation. And to have a future audience, we must safeguard our freedoms.
Thank you. I will add one more about the debate on the scope and the compositions of audience base, because it's about local, regional, and international. I think that's also the concern from the audience, from the floor. Okay, can I round up here, and thanks for your participation. Finally, Paul, our chairperson of the associations, would have a few words about the,
So I know you all have very important lives to go back to after the symposium. So I'm going to make myself really, really brief. And I just can't believe how time flies. 2 days just go by just like that. And there's so many different topics that we haven't really discussed. And so as Winsome pointed out, we should have had a session on artists and arts administrators. But only 2 days, 6 sessions. And I wish we could actually have had a longer symposium. And so, but just before I invite a partner in crime to join me in these closing remarks. And one of the reasons why we want to put, I know the title is a little bit stuffy, public policy. Who wants to sit through 2 hours of public policy debate, right? But I think it's important that, because in the local ecology, the governments are very important. One of the most important stakeholders of the health of arts in Hong Kong. So I think every single summit, we want to invite the government to take part, either on stage or off stage as an audience. And we're really happy to have yesterday, Lau Gongwa Gokjang, Mr. Lau, to officiate, to open our symposium. And today we're really happy to have the Undersecretary, Mr. Jack Chan, to be in the audience today. And it's 2 hours to a lot of us is actually not a lot, but for a government official in that level, it is a lot of time, a huge amount of time. And I think it's important that he's in the audience. And also I think it's really heartening for me to find out that this year we have almost 80 representatives, participants from the LCSD and HAB. So I think that's really heartening to see so many of them in the audience, because we work together all the time. So I think we need to actually understand each other better and work more closely together. And so on that note, thank you very much, Jack. If I may, Mr. Chan, sorry. Yes, and Kazan, our colleague in HAB. And so as you can see, artists are quite loud. And artists are really, really unruly can be at times. But I think artists are good people. I think inherently this is my belief, artists are inherently good people. And so they just want to voice out their, passion about the city. And so on that note, may I introduce my partner in crime, Selena Chin, the vice chair at the HKAAA. The reason why I wanted to, it was not in the program, is just to show that to organize, to put together a symposium like this, it's not one person or two persons' job. It takes a whole village to put together a symposium like this. And so, and Teresa, the AAA, the office, the team led by Teresa, done a good job, very good job. Thank you. And have another mic, please, for Selena. And as promised, I will wrap up really quickly. And so I always find hokey at the end to have a closing remarks because so much has been said. Why do you need me to talk, to recap everything all over again? You don't need me to do that. But I just want to find out, those of you remain here, I think we actually had a really good turnout both days. And so at my opening remarks, I asked you to actually talk to strangers. One of the main reasons to have this symposium is to have you to meet new people and people that you might work with. Well, you might find them socially interesting. You want to be friends with them. But I think another layer of interaction is to actually be able to work with these people that you actually didn't know beforehand. So can you raise your hands, those of you actually met someone that you might be able to work with? Great! So we've done our job, Selena, don't you think?
Yes. Okay, Hong Kong is a cosmopolitan city, a place where East meets West. So now I change channel to 廣東話。OK，其實我哋今日諗呢個主題都諗咗好耐，即係當初點解會叫Build Future Audience？其實我哋翻去好似opening speech Patrick 嘅 opening speech， 其實文化或者藝術嘅價值喺邊咧 ？Value of culture， 其實可能唔同層面嘅人睇文化都諗好唔同。咁最初其實藝術係好簡單嘅。中意唱歌就唱歌，中意跳舞就跳舞，只不過係表達我哋自己嘅情緒。咁但係點解搞到今時今日大家要去為 audience 去開一個 symposium， 要諗下點樣 build audience 咧？咁其實我哋睇到咧喺我哋嘅 sector 入邊，其實大家都可能面對唔同嘅困難。咁好似其實我哋有時好似頭先傾到一啲 policy makers 咁，其實佢哋都有佢哋嘅困難。點解？佢哋都會面對人哋問佢點解我要俾咁多錢俾文化呢？我點解唔去俾教育，唔去俾醫療呢？點解要俾一啲文化官員你俾錢呢啲咁多做文化嘅人？咁其實大家面對都係唔同。咁所以一個地方嘅文化發展好似今日咁咧，大家都傾咧就係話，其實係 engage audience， 要 engage policy makers， 當然亦都係 engage 唔同我哋啲 art administrator 一齊去合作，去為香港或者為呢一個社會。咁我哋覺得今日大家有咁好嘅一個討論呢，係多謝大家俾咗好多好好嘅 sharing 俾我哋。多謝。咁同埋 sorry， 仲要講一個呢，就係話其實頭先都有好多 suggestion， 就係話將來會有啲咩 topics 可以傾嘅，包括一啲impact 嘅 measurement 啦，或者big data whatever。咁大家如果對將來我哋嘅 symposium 或者個 summit 有啲咩 title， 你哋係想建議我哋去討論嘅，麻煩話俾 Teresa 聽，我哋會聆聽各位嘅意見。
Yeah. OK， 講中文定講英文 ？So
講普通話。
普通咁唔得，日文啦不如。No, but so I switch back to English, and so there are two things about the AAA. So we put on this symposium just to facilitate talks and change. I think we broached on that subject, change. I think we can talk all we want. We can talk for years and years and decades. But if you don't do something about it, nothing's going to change. And so I talked to Duncan yesterday, and I had a good talk with him yesterday. So we both agreed that once you put something in place, once you put the brick and mortar in place, whether people like it or not, they start talking. That refocus people's attention. So I think what Selena brought out and what Tim brought out earlier was that Hong Kong AAA is here to help the sector to get better conditions to work, better arts, and better best practices, basically. And so what we want to do with this symposium, this 2-day symposium, is we're going to write up a report on audience development. And so there might be some gaping holes because we didn't talk about some issues. We're going to fill out those holes, and we're going to present that report to the power that be, And so, that's the first step of like affecting change. That you put like your action on paper and push it out to like people who care and who can do something about it. And so the other thing is that to go back to what Tim said, R&D is so important. I think we're so behind the social sector. Like they've done R&D left and right, up and top and bottom, and inside out. And so I think if we want to have legitimacy as artists and as arts managers, we need to have data to prove that we actually have values. And so value proposition is important. And so without really some serious R&D, we can only talk about why we're good for the arts, but without any substantiation, which is important. And so on those two notes, and is there anything you want to add?
Group pictures.
Yeah, so the final necessary evil, the photo taking opportunity. So on this note, on behalf of the Hong Kong Arts Administrators Association, thank you to the sponsors, to the partnering organizations, West Kowloon, ADC, ADA, Art Center. I probably forgot a whole bunch of names. But anyway, so on behalf of the AAA, thank you very much for joining us today, and I hope you can actually come away with some inspiration. And do give us, and by the way, we accept memberships. So I forgot one very important thing. Donation, and the reason why I forgot, and I should actually have never forgotten about the membership, is that we need a bigger voice. So by you joining the AAA, our voice will be bigger. And so I think Patrick mentioned about artists being really, really terrible lobbyists, and we are. And so by you guys joining us, we actually could have a bigger voice, and so we can lobby a little bit more loudly and better.